The river was trying to kill them. Waves the height of palm trees slammed against the canoe. Rain fell so hard it felt like stones. Old Ogbuagu gripped the side of the boat, his knuckles pale, his voice swallowed by thunder. "Paddle, Nnoma, paddle." But Nnoma had stopped paddling. She stood up in the middle of the canoe, in the middle of a storm that had already swallowed 2 fishing boats that season, and she raised both hands toward the sky. "Nnoma, sit down. You will kill us both." She did not sit down. Her eyes were closed, her lips were moving, and then she spoke, not to her father, not to the sky, she spoke to the river, in a language nobody taught her, in a voice that did not sound like her own. The water heard her. First the waves flattened, then the wind died. Then the rain stopped, not slowly, the way rain normally stops. It stopped the way a man stops speaking when something greater than him says enough. Dead silence. On the shore, 30 villagers stood with their mouths open. A woman dropped her clay pot. A child buried his face in his mother's wrapper. An old man whispered, "Who is that girl?" Nobody answered, because nobody truly knew. Her name was Nnoma. She was 23 years old. She had her father's laugh and her father's love for the river, but she did not have his eyes, or his nose, or his blood. And somewhere in a palace 3 days' journey from that river, a king sat on a golden stool, cursed, childless, and slowly being destroyed by a secret he had buried 23 years ago. He had no idea that the river had just spoken through his daughter. Not yet. 23 years before that storm, there was a woman named Chalugo. She was a teacher in the village of Uli, the kind of woman people turned to look at twice, not because she was loud, because she carried a quiet beauty that made the world slow down around her. And Prince Odinaka had fallen completely, recklessly in love with her. They met by the river, always by the river. He would come without his guards, without his royal wrapper, wearing plain cloth like any ordinary young man. And she would sit beside him and talk about stars, about books, about the way the river changed color at sunset. "You make me forget I am a prince," he told her one evening. She laughed softly. "You make me forget I should know better." For 1 year they were happy. Then a Chalugo told him she was pregnant. Odinaka went very still. The kind of stillness that is not peace, it is fear wearing a quiet face. "We will find a way," he said, but his eyes said something completely different. 3 weeks later he sent a messenger. Not a letter, a messenger, so there would be no evidence. The message was short. The prince cannot marry a commoner. The council will not allow it. She should go quietly and tell no one. Chalugo read the message 3 times. Then she sat on the floor of her small room, and she did not move for 2 days. Her neighbors thought she was sick. She was not sick. She was becoming someone else, the kind of woman that grief builds when it has nowhere else to go. Months passed, her body changed. She hid it under heavy wrappers. She stopped going to the market. She stopped teaching. When the baby finally came, she was completely alone. A girl, perfect, tiny, with eyes that seemed to already understand too much. A Chalugo held her for 1 full night. She memorized the smell of her. She counted her fingers twice. She sang every song she knew. Then she made a basket from palm fronds, lined it with her finest wrapper, the one she had been saving for her wedding day, and she carried the baby to the river Mmiri Amaka before the sun rose. "I cannot keep you," she whispered, "but I am not throwing you away. There is a difference. Please know there is a difference." She placed the basket on the water. The river took it gently, as if it had been waiting. A Chalugo stood at the bank until the basket disappeared around the bend. Then she walked back to her room, locked the door, and screamed into her pillow until she had nothing left inside her. She never taught again. She never returned to the river. And she never, not once, stopped thinking about the child the water had taken. Old Ogbuagu found the basket at dawn. He had been fishing since before sunrise the way he did every morning, ever since his wife died and his sons moved to the city and the house became too quiet to sleep inside. His net pulled up something heavy. He thought it was a large catch. He was already smiling when he pulled it over the side of the boat. A basket, a wrapper, and inside the wrapper, a baby girl, dry, warm, and staring up at him with calm eyes that held no fear at all. Ogbuagu, who had not cried since the day they buried his wife, sat in his canoe in the middle of the river and wept like a small child. "Who left you here?" he whispered. The baby blinked slowly. "All right," he said, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "All right, come then." He named her Nnoma. It meant bird because she had arrived the way birds arrive, without warning, as if the sky simply decided to send her. From that day, strange blessings followed Ogbuagu everywhere. His nets were always full. Rains came exactly when his farm needed them. His small garden produced more than neighbors twice his size. The village people began saying the old fisherman had found favor with the river spirits. They were not wrong. They simply did not know the full story. Nnoma grew up loved, completely, simply, and loudly loved. Ogbuagu walked her to school every morning. He taught her to read the river. He sat outside their small house each evening and told her stories until she fell asleep on his shoulder. She was a quiet child, but the river always recognized her. When she was 7, she fell into the water during a storm and came up completely dry. When she was 12, she called fish to the surface with her bare hands and laughed when they came. When she was 16, she stopped a flood with a single word. Ogbuagu never questioned any of it. "The river loves you," he would say simply, "and I love you. That is enough explanation for any man." It was enough, until the day it wasn't. 3 days' journey away, King Odinaka Yugo was losing his kingdom slowly. It started with the fish. The sacred fish that had lived in the palace pond for 4 generations were found dead one morning, all of them, floating belly up with no explanation. The palace priests examined the water. They found nothing wrong with it. The fish were simply gone. Then the wells dried up. 3 of the 5 palace wells within the same season. Women who had drawn water from those wells, their entire lives came back with empty pots and frightened faces. Then the harvests failed. 2 in a row. The granaries emptied. The people grew hungry, and hungry people asked questions that comfortable people never dare to ask. Why has the king produced no heir? He had married twice, 2 noble women from powerful families. Both marriages performed with full ceremony, both women healthy and strong, and yet nothing, no pregnancy, no child, no sign that the royal bloodline would continue. The palace medicine men came and went. The herbalists tried everything they knew. Nothing worked. His first wife Adiz said it to his face one evening, quietly, the way the most dangerous truths are always delivered. "My king," she said, setting down her cup carefully, "is there something in your past that the gods are still holding on to?" Odinaka Yugo did not answer her. But that night he could not sleep. He lay on his back and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in 23 years he let himself think about a chalugo, about the message he sent instead of going himself, about the child he never asked about, never looked for, never allowed himself to grieve. He had told himself for 23 years that it was duty, that it was the right decision for the kingdom, that a king must sometimes choose his throne over his heart. Lying in the dark, surrounded by a dying kingdom, he finally admitted what he had always known. He had been afraid, that was all, a coward dressed in royal cloth. The elders called an emergency council. The verdict was unanimous. A diviner had to be consulted, not the regular palace priest, the real one. The old woman who lived beyond the eastern forest and had not been summoned in 40 years. Her name was Ulo. When she arrived at the palace gates, even the guards stepped aside without being told. She was ancient in the way that certain things are ancient, not worn down but compressed, like the oldest part of a tree where all the rings are pressed together. She moved without hurry. She arrived exactly where she intended. She sat in the center of the throne room, poured palm wine on the ground, broke kola nut, closed her eyes and entered her trance while the entire palace held its breath. When she opened her eyes, she looked directly at the king. "You know why I am here," she said. Odinaka Yugo said nothing. 23 years ago, Ulo said, her voice filling every corner of the room, you planted a child and abandoned the ground. The river took what you threw away, and Mmiri Amaka does not forget. A murmur moved through the council like a wave. The spirits have closed the womb of this palace, she continued. No child will be born here. No heir will sit on this throne. The curse holds until the lost one is found, until the king kneels before what he discarded, until the truth is spoken out loud with nothing hidden. The king's hands were shaking under the arm of his throne. She is alive, he asked. His voice came out smaller than he intended. She is alive, Ulo said, and the river speaks through her. The messengers left before sunrise the following morning. 6 of them riding in different directions. Armed with one description, a young woman, approximately 23 years old, who has power over water. It took them 11 days. The rumor found them in a riverside market 3 villages from Uli. An old pepper seller leaned forward across her tray and lowered her voice the way people do when they are sharing something they consider almost too strange to say. You want the girl who stopped the storm? She lives with the old fisherman, Ogbuagu. Everybody along this river knows him. Within the hour, the king's messengers were standing at the door of a small mud house at the edge of the water. Ogbuagu opened the door. He looked at the royal wrappers, the palace insignia, the formal staffs of authority. His face gave nothing away. What do you want? We are looking for a young woman named Nnoma. Why? The king of Umus requests her presence at the palace. Ogbuagu's jaw tightened slowly. The king makes requests of kings. Nnoma is my daughter. From inside the house came Nnoma's voice. Pa, who is it? Ogbuagu turned. She was standing in the inner doorway behind him, a wrapper tied at her waist, her hair undone, a wooden cooking spoon still in her hand. She looked at the messengers. The lead messenger looked at her. He took one slow breath, the kind a man takes when he finds something he was not entirely sure existed. The king of Umus, he said carefully, believes you may be his daughter. The wooden spoon fell out of Nnoma's hand and hit the floor. Ogbuagu did not move, did not speak. His face did something complicated, the face of a man watching a truth arrive that he had always known was coming and had spent 23 years quietly dreading. His daughter, Nnoma repeated. Yes. She looked at Ogbuagu. He looked at the floor. Pa, her voice dropped, quiet and sharp at the same time. Pa, look at me. He looked up, his eyes were wet. Is there something you never told me? He crossed the room in 3 steps and held her face in both his old river-cracked hands. I told you everything that mattered, he said. I found you in the river. I raised you as my own. I love you as my own. Everything else was the river's business. It was never mine to give away. Nnoma covered his hands with hers. She did not cry. She stood very still the way the river stands still before it decides what it will do next. Then she turned to face the messengers. Tell the king I will come, she said, but I come with my father, my real father, the one who was there. The journey to the palace took 3 days by canoe. Nnoma watched the river the entire way. Ogbuagu sat beside her and said very little. He was the kind of man who communicated through presence, and his presence said everything it needed to say. I am here. I am not going anywhere. No palace in this world changes that. On the second night, they camped on the riverbank. After Ogbuagu fell asleep by the fire, Nnoma walked to the water's edge alone and sat with her feet in the current. Did you always know who I was? She asked the river quietly. The water moved around her feet, warm, gentle, like an answer that had no need for words. I am not angry, she said, and as she said it, she realized it was completely true. She was not angry. She was something harder to name. She was reckoning. Coming face to face with a story that had always belonged to her, but was only now being placed in her hands. She thought about the woman who had put her in the river. She could not yet call her mother. That word was floating somewhere unclaimed, waiting for a place to land. She looked back at Ogbuagu sleeping by the fire. his old chest rising and falling slowly in the firelight. That man she could name. That man she would always be able to name. The palace was everything her village was not. High carved walls, pillars wrapped in colored cloth, guards who stood so still they looked like they had been placed there by an artist, the smell of incense and palm oil and old wood. People stared as she walked through the gates. She kept her chin level and her eyes straight ahead. Ogbuagu walked one step behind her, not because he was lesser, but because this moment belonged to her, and he understood that completely. They were led to a wide-open courtyard and asked to wait. Then the king came through the far doorway. Nnoma had expected. She did not know exactly what she had expected. Something hard, perhaps. Someone cold. A man who looked like a decision she could hate cleanly and completely. But Odinaka Yugo walked into that courtyard, looking like a man who had been carrying an enormous weight for so long that the weight had become part of his body. His robes were immaculate. His posture was the posture of a king. But his eyes were the eyes of a man who had not slept without guilt in 23 years. He stopped when he saw her. He could not speak for a moment, because Nnoma had her mother's face, the same quiet, the same intelligence sitting just behind the eyes, the same way of holding the jaw that said, "I see everything and I am deciding very carefully what to do with it." "You are her," he said. It was not a question. Nnoma looked at him steadily and gave nothing away. "I am still finding out who I am," she said. "I only just discovered I had been looking." The Oracle Ulo stepped forward from the side of the courtyard. "The river confirms it," she said. "This is the child." Odinaka Yugo, king of Yumus, ruler of 7 villages, began to lower himself to his knees. "Don't," Nnoma said. He stopped, halfway down. "Don't kneel yet," she said. "First speak to me. Tell me the truth, all of it, not what the oracle announced, from your own mouth." He straightened slowly. He nodded. "Sit," he said quietly. "Please." They sat across from each other in the middle of the courtyard, while the whole kingdom held its breath outside the walls. And he told her everything. He told her about Ichilugo, about the riverbank evenings, about the year he had been happier than he deserved to be. He spoke slowly, choosing each word the way a man chooses his steps when the ground beneath him is uncertain. He told her about the council, about the law against marrying a commoner, and then he said the words plainly, without decoration, without excuse. "I was afraid. I chose the throne over your mother, over you. I told myself it was duty. It was not duty, it was cowardice." Nnoma sat with her hands folded in her lap and listened without moving. "When she told me she was carrying you," he continued, "I sent a messenger instead of going to her myself, because I could not look at her face. I already knew what I was doing was wrong. I did it anyway." Silence settled between them like water finding its level. "Did you ever look for her after?" Nnoma asked. "My mother." "No." "Did you think about her?" "Every year. On certain nights I would begin to think and then I would stop, because the thinking was painful and I was still a coward." "And me," her voice was steady. "Did you think about me?" He looked at her directly. He owed her that much. "I told myself there was no you," he said, "that it was easier not to know. I told myself that for 23 years. I understand now that I was lying to myself every single day." Nnoma looked down at her hands. The same hands that had stopped a storm 3 days ago. The same hands that had spent 23 years pulling fish from the river beside an old man who had never once made her feel like anything less than everything. She raised her eyes back to his. "My mother placed me in the river and begged the spirits to protect me," she said. "Your river then cursed you for 23 years, and a poor fisherman who had nothing found me and gave me everything he had." She let that sit in the air between them. "The river has been trying to tell you something for 23 years, she said, "and you kept choosing not to listen." Odinaka Yugo's face broke. There is no softer way to say it. A man's face can hold a performance for a very long time, and then something true is said directly into it, and the performance collapses the way cloth collapses in rain, all at once, with nothing left holding it up. "I know," he said. His voice came out rough and stripped of everything royal. "I know." Nnoma stood. She walked across the courtyard to where Ogbuagu was standing at the far edge, still and patient and quiet, the way he had always been. She stood beside him and took his hand in both of hers. Then she turned back to face the king. "This man," she said, "found me on the morning you lost me. He fed me with a fisherman's earnings. He taught me with a fisherman's wisdom. He loved me without condition for 23 years and never once asked anything in return." Her voice did not waver. "Whatever happens from this day, he is my father. That is not a temporary arrangement. That is not something a palace or a title or a bloodline can reassign. He is my father, and that does not change. Not today, not ever." The courtyard was completely silent. Odinaka Yugo looked at Ogbuagu for a long moment. He looked at the plain cloth, the river-worn hands, the quiet dignity of a man who had done something greater with nothing than a king had done with everything. He stood up from his seat. He walked across the courtyard toward the old fisherman. And then, in front of his full council, his wives, his guards, and every palace worker watching from the doorways, the king of Yumus bowed his head before an old fisherman from a river village. "You did what I should have done," he said. "You were the father I failed to be. I owe you a debt I do not have the currency to repay. But I am asking if you will allow me to spend the rest of my life trying." Ogbuagu looked at the king for a long, steady moment. Then he looked at Nnoma. She gave the smallest nod. Ogbuagu turned back to the king. "I did not find her for reward," he said. "The river sent her to me. I only did what any man with a working heart would do." He paused. "But if you are asking whether I will accept your respect, yes, that I will accept." The Oracle Ulo raised both hands. "It is finished," she said. Her voice moved through the courtyard and beyond the walls and out across the open air. "The truth has been spoken. The wrong has been named. The lost one has been found and claimed. Mmiri Amaka releases this house." That was the moment the rain began. Not a storm, not the violent, angry rain of a curse breaking loose, just clean, steady rain. The kind farmers pray for in dry season. The kind that smells like the earth exhaling. The kind that feels like forgiveness made physical. Outside the palace walls, the people who had gathered turned their faces upward. One woman laughed. Then a man beside her laughed. Then it spread through the crowd the way relief always spreads, suddenly, completely, like a fire that has finally found dry wood. In the weeks that followed, things settled the way real things always settle, not in one large dramatic moment, but in many small, quiet ones. Nnoma did not move into the palace immediately. She went home first. She needed to sit in her father's house, eat his soup, sleep in her own bed, and let the new shape of her life become something familiar before she tried to live inside it fully. She needed to hear the river from the window she had always heard it from. She needed ordinary mornings before she could face extraordinary ones. Odinaka Yugo sent gifts to Ogbuagu's house, but more importantly, he sent himself. He came twice in those weeks. He sat with the old fisherman in his small courtyard and said very little. He listened to Ogbuagu talk about Nnoma as a child, her first time on a canoe, the day she called the fish with her hands, the evening she stopped a flood and then asked calmly what was for dinner. The king laughed at that last one, genuinely. The laugh of a man being shown something he missed entirely and understanding for the first time what the missing cost him. He did not try to compete. He did not try to reclaim ground. He came the way a man comes when he is trying to learn what love looks like when it is not afraid of anything. Ichilugo was found 3 months later. She was living in a town far from the river, deliberately far. She had built a careful, quiet life for herself. She had not married. She taught young children at a small school and was known in her neighborhood as a gentle woman who kept mostly to herself. She was not unhappy exactly, but she had the face of someone who had learned over many years to live inside a loss without being destroyed by it. When the messenger came and told her that her daughter was alive, that the river had carried her safely to a fisherman, that she had grown up loved, that she could calm storms with her hands, A chalugo sat down very slowly in her chair and did not speak for a long time. "Is she angry with me?" was the first thing she said. The messenger chose his words carefully. "She asks to meet you." She did not use the word angry. She said unfinished. The meeting between a chalugo and Nnoma happened by the river. Of course it did. They sat side by side at the water's edge for a long time before either of them spoke. Nnoma looked at her mother's face and found herself living inside it, her own nose, her own cheekbones, the shape of her own eyes looking back at her from another person's face for the first time in her life. "You placed me in the river," Nnoma said quietly. "I asked the river to take care of you," a chalugo said. Her voice was barely holding itself together. "I did not know what else to do. I was broken and completely alone, and I could not give you the life you deserved. But I could not," she stopped, steadied herself. "I could not end you. You were mine, and I could not end what was mine." Nnoma was quiet for a moment. "The river did take care of me," she said finally. "It sent me the best man it could find." A chalugo closed her eyes. A single tear moved down the side of her face, and she did not wipe it away. "I am not ready to call you mother," Nnoma said. "I want to be honest with you from the very beginning. I do not have that word free right now. It belongs to a feeling I have not yet arrived at, but I am willing to begin the journey toward it, if you are willing to be patient with me while I travel." A chalugo opened her eyes. She nodded. She could not speak. "Good," Nnoma said gently. And she reached out and placed her hand over her mother's hand, where it rested on the ground between them. They sat by the river together until the sun went all the way down and the water turned dark, and the stars came out one by one above them. Nnoma was formally recognized as Princess of Umuse before the full council and the people of the kingdom. She accepted the title, but she made one condition before she accepted anything. Ogbuagu came with her. The old fisherman was given a proper house within the palace grounds. He was given land, provision, and comfort for the rest of his days. And Odinaka Yugo created a title specifically for him, one that had never existed in the kingdom before and would never need to exist again. Father of the River's Daughter. Ogbuagu complained about the title every single day. He wore it with the pride of a man who had earned something that could not be bought, inherited, or taken away. The kingdom recovered the way a body recovers after a long illness, gradually, then all at once. The wells filled. The fish returned to the river in numbers the oldest fishermen said they had not seen in a generation. The next harvest came in so heavy that the granaries could not hold all of it. The people said Mmiri Amaka was satisfied. And sometimes in the early evenings, when the palace had quieted and the day's business was finished, Nnoma would walk alone down to the river, now a royal river, her river, the river that had carried her and kept her and brought her back, and she would sit at the edge with her feet in the current the way she had done since she was a small child. The water would move around her feet, warm, unhurried, present. And she would whisper, "I know who I am now." The river would answer the way it always answered, not with words, not with signs, simply by staying, simply by being exactly where it had always been. By not letting go. Pride and fear can bury love so deep that a generation pays the price for it. But truth, spoken fully in the open, with nothing hidden, and forgiveness, chosen freely, without condition, these two things together can restore everything that silence tried to destroy forever. Even a daughter lost to a river. Even a king lost to himself. Even a mother lost to grief. The river knew from the very beginning. It was only waiting for the rest of them to finally catch up. If this story moved something inside you, like this video, leave a comment telling us which moment stayed with you and subscribe. There are more stories here waiting for you.